Once again, it's a very good afternoon, a good morning, or good evening to you, wherever you are listening to this podcast, either live or on your favorite streaming service. My name is Natalie Ashdown from the Open Door Coaching Group, and welcome to our Coaching Cafe. Today, we're talking about coaching upwards, and I'm joined by Paula Jones Hunt, back healthy and fit again to join us after not being well with laryngitis. So, welcome back, Paula.
Thank you. Very happy that my voice has found its joy again.
We are very happy too. So before we begin, let me acknowledge the traditional owners, the custodians on the lands on which we meet today, and their continuing connection to the land, the waters, and the communities of Australia, and the lands from all around the world where you might be joining us today or listening to this on your favourite streaming service. We pay our respects to them, to elders past, present, and emerging, and elders from Indigenous communities from all around the world. Well, our topic today is we've been focusing for the last few weeks actually on real topics in coaching in the workplace, and we have covered everything from I don't know what to say and juggling and what if I know the answer. And today we're also tackling another topic that we hear often, and that is, can we use these coaching tools that we have for coaching upwards? So it's not uncommon actually in our coach training, be it the leader as coach or the certificate for in workplace and business coaching, for people to actually ask us and say things like, these coaching tools are great, but can we use the tools for coaching upwards? Does it work with my peers, etc.? And so we're answering that question today. And I know there's a lot of people on the line who are very experienced in this area too. So I do encourage you to join us in the conversation. You can do that by popping a message into the chat box, and we'll pick up your messages and your comments and your questions as we go along there. So I'm also going to introduce you to the 5 Ps for coaching upwards as well. So give you a few extra tips about coaching upwards. For those of you who are new to our Coaching Cafe, we say every week, welcome. We are all about creating a community, having shared learning experiences and thought-provoking conversations. And for those of you that are regulars, welcome back. You know that we love Fridays and catching up with you every Friday to focus on our professional development as coaches. We might have been coach trained recently, we might have had coaching years ago, but one of the wonderful things that we are all doing together is focusing on our continuous professional development in coaching every single week. So I want to acknowledge you all for doing that as well. Of course, I'm excited to be here with you and with Paula as well. Of course, we have CCU on offer. If you are interested, you can hold on the line to the end of the conversation and we will offer you the free ICSC CEUs. You can take a screenshot and save them somewhere safely. So let's get into our conversation together. This idea of coaching upwards, quite often in our coach training, we notice that people are very comfortable actually to coach people around them. They're thinking about their teams and how they can coach their teams, which is wonderful because we're bringing coaching in as part of everything that we do in everyday conversations. And as people start to reflect more and more about how they can actually use the coaching, how they can use the coaching tools in the workplace, invariably the conversation comes to, what about the boss? Can you actually use coaching upwards to the boss or the boss's boss? To my manager or my manager's manager? And it often comes with a little sense of frustration, actually, that this is great, like I'm on the course and I'm loving it, but what about above? And it's not uncommon actually for people to express that bit of frustration in a way of saying, well, it's great that we're all doing the course and it's great that we're all learning the skills, but what about the people above? So you get this sense of, can we use it? Why aren't they doing it? A sense that management above and beyond should be coaching as well, but they're not. Like they might be directing or telling, or they're not walking their talk. So it's a bit of a kind of a confusing. We're trying to sort out how we can use coaching laced with a bit of frustration about what we think that people should be doing around us as well. So that's where it comes from. And so what happened quite a few years ago now, we were actually having this conversation when I was delivering a program at Air Force. Shout out to all our coaching colleagues and friends at Air Force, where we've delivered the program all around Australia at different bases at Air Force. We were having this conversation at Air Force. Can you coach upwards? And it was in the military context as well. So you had the hierarchy well and truly entrenched as well. And we asked the question and we're having the conversation. And as part of that conversation in the room at the time, there was a very, very senior Air Force person, Air Commodore Ian Scott. And we said, well, let's ask them. Let's ask the senior people in the room. And the important thing about this was when we were delivering the Air Force course, there was no rank in the room. So people were wearing civilian clothes, as we do with each of our programs. So it wasn't about rank and hierarchy in the coaching in the room. But we actually thought, well, we have this experienced person in the room. Let's hear from them. And so Ian was really generous to talk to us about what would it mean to be coaching a very senior person in the Air Force. What would that look like? And from that, he and the other colleagues at Air Force coined what we call the 5 Ps. The 5 Ps of coaching upwards. So normally Ian would be here to actually talk to us about the 5 Ps. He is actually not available. He is traveling internationally with Rotary and doing some amazing work, as he has done for many, many years with Rotary. So I did shout out to him to see if he was available, but he's not. But I'm going to introduce you to the 5 Ps that we've worked up over the years with Ian and our Air Force colleagues. So there you go. So when it comes to coaching upwards, the answer is yes. Yes, you can coach upwards. In fact, if we're building a culture of coaching within our organizations, we want to be coaching upwards. We want to be coaching upwards, downwards, sideways. We want to be coaching ourselves. We want an openness to coaching. We want to have everyday coaching conversations. We don't want these barriers to coaching which come from hierarchy. So the answer is, can I coach upwards? The answer is yes. Now, Paula, before I jump in with the 5 Ps, tell me, I know you've had a lot of experience in introducing managers to coaching and senior leaders to coaching. And I know this has come up a lot with you in your lived experience in the workplace as a leader in HR as well. What have you noticed, or what are your thoughts on this idea of coaching upwards? I know you think it's needed, but what's the experience out there in the field, do you think?
Yes, so I mean, particularly in a HR role, most of the people I worked with are higher than me. I'm working with CEOs, senior leaders, and from a HR perspective, you're a subject matter expert working with someone. But I've also had managers myself that I've used coaching. And it hasn't necessarily been a woe to go executive coaching session with someone, but it's as easy as things like you're given a piece of work and you can use really great coaching questions to clarify and dig in and find out exactly what's required. So, things like, so what would success look like for this project? Really simple coaching question, but it's about understanding the expectations from the manager. Or they're talking to you about something. Well, what are the options we have to be able to do this? How could we go about doing this? What do we think will work best here? And I have used it successfully across organizations from that perspective too, where the other thing that happens is the more you ask these questions, the more you use coaching in the way that you're working, it suddenly starts morphing and people start doing it as well. And my favorite thing in the world is when managers start asking me the questions that I've been asking them. And that's when you know that the coaching upwards has taken place.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things that I'm taking out of what you've just said then, Paula. First of all, is you are having these coaching upward moments, if you like, in an everyday kind of conversation way. So asking the additional questions as we would. And I think that's very important. And then, of course, you said it's lovely when people start asking you those questions back, which is very cool. And I think the other thing that comes up for me as well, and we talk about this often, is that we're not asking these questions in a kind of insubordination way. And I say that because the topic came up with Air Force, that we're questioning the boss, that we're being insubordinate. It's not that. It's the openness, it's the curiousness, it's the focus on continuous improvement. I think that I'm hearing in what you're talking about. And we're coming from that space of continuous improvement, of high performance, of clarification, of getting clear, those kind of intentions, not I'm questioning the boss because the boss is an idiot, that kind of thing. And I think that's the intention is where we're coming from as well. And Scott, thank you for jumping in here. You've said it's core coaching skill that's contracting. You know, we're contracting to have this conversation. What kind of conversation do we want to have? And that's exactly what I'm picking up on, that intention. No one, regardless of rank, likes it when you try to coach them when they want to have a different conversation. Yes, because it then feels like that, you know, you're trying to coach me and I don't like it. So it is about our intent, and the way that we interact together and the openness of our conversations. And have we talked about this as well? Not as Scott said, no one likes it when you try to coach them when there's a different conversation that needs to actually have. Thank you, Brett. You've jumped in. I also asked my leader, the next one up, if I could coach them so that they could have an understanding of coaching and therefore what I was delivering in their times alongside their core coach role. I coached them on a non-work topic. The boss said that coaching was life-changing and he had it. I had a different purpose. So thank you, Brett. So I think that's a really good point as well, that we can't necessarily assume that the bosses have had coaching or that they're really aware of what's happening to a coaching point of view. Yes, they've signed off for you to do the coaching course and they're happy for you to do coaching, but we can't actually assume that they've been trained or they know all about it, even if they're great leaders. That's actually coming a lot out of my research that I'm doing for my doctorate. There's a really big theme that quite often people haven't been trained, so we can't actually assume that they know what we're talking about when we're talking about coaching as well. So great example there where Brett says, if you coach the boss on, for your actual program, for your certificate program or your diploma program, it gives them a real insight into what coaching is. And what a great example where you said the boss said that was life-changing. It's a credit to your coaching there, Brett. Well done.
Natalie,
it's also a credit to, I was going to say, it's also a credit to how open the boss is as well, because as coaches, as you know, we facilitate the awareness and the opportunity. And of course, if it's life-changing, then that's the boss who's actually dug deeper enough or thoughtful enough or reflection enough to find those opportunities. Yeah, go on, Paula.
Yeah, I think too, it sits in that space of respectfulness. For me, coaching really allows you to have a respectful conversation that might be difficult. So it's about asking questions that open up and find out more. So it's really that I'm coming to you from a place of respect and curiosity to say, how can I understand this better? Or what can we do? What other options do we have for looking at a particular something? So it really gives it that really nice respect in the conversation.
Yes, I absolutely agree. The trust, the respect, absolutely. So when we think about the 5 Ps of coaching, Brett's already given us an idea here. And so Scott, in terms of contracting and actually saying, hey, boss, I want to try my new coaching skills out on you, or hey, boss, I wonder if we could coach together. I need to coach a senior person. I want to have experience in that area. So that's a nice way of contracting, a nice way of using the coaching skills and getting into it. When it's more of an everyday coaching conversation and you're thinking about coaching upwards, Paul has already given you those questions that you can use. Let's talk about the 5 Ps now. So it was very clear to us when we were talking to people at Air Force, our coaches throughout Air Force, or coaches that have come through our programs throughout Air Force, that we need to plan. So the first of the 5 P's is plan, and that's about thinking through all of the issues. So here, the coaching questions, you can hear them already. What are the issues? What are the most important things? What makes it important for me to have this conversation? Why do I want to coach upwards? All of these questions start to fall out of what is the plan for the conversation. So we're not just talking about difficult conversations here, we're talking about everyday conversations. What's the plan for coaching? What's the plan for coaching in our unit, in our area, with the boss? Generally, all of these questions start to jump out just by thinking about the first P, which is the plan. The second P is the purpose. So let me give you the P's and then we'll talk them through. So it's the plan, the purpose, practice, pick the time and place, and plan B. So number 1, the plan we've talked about. Number 2, the purpose. So Air Force were really adamant when we talked to them about this, that the purpose, and it's obvious, isn't it, that we really talked a lot about that the purpose has to be positive for you, the boss, and the organization. So it's thinking about not just, I'm going to start coaching upwards, I'm going to start asking the boss questions. It's about what is the purpose to this? How is this interaction and these conversations that we're opening up going to be positive for you as the subordinate or as the employee, for the boss and what the boss wants to achieve. So quite often in my coaching, I'm talking about or asking the questions about, so I understand you and what you need as the coachee. I understand you and I understand your needs, and you've communicated that really clearly. What is it the boss needs? What is it the boss wants? What's important to the boss and their view of the world and their view of the organization? So these are really great coaching questions that we can ask, and they all fall under the P of purpose. Paula, did you want to jump in? I can see you nodding there.
Yeah, I always think in any conversation that you're having, really thinking about what is the purpose of this conversation is critical. And then but what's more critical is that it is in the positive. So when I worked with managers on disciplinary processes, we know that there's a disciplinary part in it, but what is the purpose of this conversation from a positive perspective for that employee? So even something like a termination, we always looked at, how can we make this a respectful process for this person? So the purpose behind this is, it's about making sure that you're going in looking at, how does this help? How does this grow? How do we develop? How do we understand more? As opposed to going in with a negative purpose. So the positivity part is critical for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not that whole toxic positivity that people talk about. And it's not also, the whole grumbling and moaning. So nobody wants, their employees to be grumbling and moaning and carrying on and bitching and moaning. So we're not talking about that. We really are, like you said, Paula, talking about the positive intention and the positive purpose about what we're trying to do. So whether it's a difficult conversation or an everyday conversation where we're just talking about the work, we want it to be that positive purpose and intention, without skipping through the daisies and singing Kumbaya. So we're being real about this as well. And I know we're kind of talking to everyone who's very familiar with coaching, and it's all, don't bring me your problems, bring me your solutions. That comes from like the 1970s or the 1980s, but it still rings out true. And that's where coaching comes into it, to offer the options, and that could be your purpose or your intention, is to offer more options, to have another think about this, to get a better way of solution to move forward, etc., etc. So all of that comes into it. Vishandra, thank you. Joining us from India on the line. It's wonderful to have you join in and open up the conversation with us as well. And thank you for giving us this perspective as well. For a supervisor to show vulnerability and trust is a slow process. A breakthrough does not happen in the first few sessions. Should we contract playing by the ear or a fixed number of sessions? Well, that's a really great question. We can do the everyday coaching questions, as we've talked about, or we can do exactly what you suggested. We can say, hey, boss, I'd appreciate the opportunity to coach you. And as you've suggested, let's contract for 4 or 5, 4 sessions or something like that. My preference is actually the formal approach that you suggest there, that I imagine, Brett, that you've actually done. And that is contract for a fixed number of sessions, say four coaching sessions, where I'm actually formally coaching you, boss. You can play it by ear. You can have everyday conversations as well, but I definitely like the other approach as well. The reason for that is because then it formalizes our conversations, it formalizes the coaching approach, and it also formalizes our interactions, how we're going to work together, that there's follow-up, that there's actions, that those meetings get booked in our diaries as well. So there's a lot of benefits from contracting with a fixed number. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Also, what can happen, Natalie, is when you have those casual conversations and they get a gist for it, you can then say, well, this is part of the coaching process. Would you like us to have some coaching sessions? Or what I found mostly happened was managers say, they were really great questions. Can I have some formal coaching sessions on other topics? So it sort of migrates itself. It's a nice little segue.
Yeah, it is. That's right. And it depends on everything, doesn't it? The time, the place, the busyness, all that kind of stuff as well. Yeah. We often say with people that are doing our certificate for and workplace and business coaching or the leader as coach programs, use your coaching assignments for this purpose, particularly if you're doing the diploma as well. You've got an assignment there to coach a senior person. So there is an opportunity to say, hey, I need to do a coaching assignment. I need to do coaching practice. Please, can I have this opportunity? So you can use your assignments. It's I have to do an assignment. Can I coach you? That's another way of doing it as well. So practice is important as well. And this is particularly when we're talking about feedback conversations as well. So if the coaching upwards is around feedback and giving the boss some feedback, we are giving feedback using a coaching approach. The very strong advice here is to run through the conversation with somebody else. Check your wording, check the approach, check whether it's coming across in the way that you actually want it to. Practice your coaching questions on other people. See whether they land the way you want them to. See whether the timing, see whether the language is appropriate. All of those kind of things come into it. Picking the place and time is really important too, the 4th P here. And this is around obviously the place and time. So when is a good time to have a coaching conversation? Is it a corridor conversation? Is it a sit down, more formal conversation like we've talked about? The other pieces of advice here that was offered to us from Air Force is think about the mood. So the boss's mood. I think about your mood in terms of the timing. So mood, MOOD. If they're under a super amount of pressure, the boss, is it a good time for coaching? It might be, actually. It might actually be the right time for coaching. Alternatively, it might not be. So we're thinking about your mood, their mood, and the work tempo. So the battle rhythm, the work tempo, the urgency, whatever's going on. If it's urgent, like we've talked about in situational coaching, the pressure's on, etc., now it may not be the right time to start asking all your great coaching questions. Alternatively, it might actually be the right time. So we've got to pick it, don't we? It might be the right time to talk about risk, to talk about contingency, to talk about, hang on a second, let's just take a breath here. All of those things are possible. So it is taking a moment and thinking about timing, place, etc.
I think it's one of those ones too where you have to read the room read the room and even if you've planned, if you go in and you read the room and it doesn't feel quite right, then maybe it's not quite right. But it doesn't mean you abandon. It just means you might change for a different day, or you might hold, unless it's critical. If it's critical, then you might need to still have the conversation. But it really is that, for me, it's the read the room moment.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of summarizing that. Thank you. We could have read the room, but that would be start with R and not P, so that would throw out our 5 Ps. Alrighty, the plan B is the final P, and this was the other 4 Ps are pretty obvious, aren't they? This was the one that actually, when it was shared with me, I thought, oh, okay. So plan B is basically have a plan when the conversation that you're having, the coaching conversation, for example, or the feedback conversation as well, is not going as it intended. And it comes back to what you were saying, Scott, about no one wants to have a coaching conversation. Uh, you said no one, regardless of rank, likes it when you try to coach them when they want to have a different conversation. So here you are trying to coach, but they want to have a different conversation. You need plan B. So when the conversation is not going as intended, this is where you might exit. And Ian had some very good words here, taking responsibility actually for, hey, boss, this conversation is not quite going the way I wanted. How about we regroup and I go away and think about what we're trying to achieve and we regroup, or something along those lines. So it's taking responsibility for, you started out down this path thinking this might be a great approach and it's not quite working out. It might be annoying the boss, frustrating the boss. You might have read the room, it's just not the right time, etc. Whatever it might be. If it's not going as intended, then we can have a plan B, exit, or we could direct and tell, or we could just put the options there, or whatever it might be. And I did like the fact that Ian shared this with us, because we might be all fired up about coaching and the coaching approach, and this is the way we need to do it, but it might not actually be appropriate, I suppose, is the simplest way to say it.
Yeah, and I think I really like the idea of saying I need to go away and think about this a little bit more. I don't think I've got enough to continue with this conversation, because it's a really good way to exit you out without it. It's not saying I'm not going to come back and talk about this conversation. We're still going to talk about it, but I really need to have a think about my approach before we continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of things come up for me here too, about whether you segue or you flag, not segue, but whether you flag to the boss that, hey, can we have a conversation around this? You probably would. Whether you say, oh, can we have a coaching conversation around this? You probably would, mate. You might not say that. So your intention is to have a conversation, asking great questions, getting their input, this kind of thing. So whether you've actually contracted, flagged it in the beginning, you might have to have a think about. But it's good advice for any conversation, really, rather than trying to, flog that conversation when it's not going anywhere. You can think about plan B. Well, so there you have it. Yeah, so
it could also be, Natalie, I've heard what you said, and now I'd like to have a really good think about it. Because then you're acknowledging what the other person's saying, that you just want to have some time to really consider what they've said. And I think that's really cool too.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. So there you have it, everyone. The question was, can we coach upwards? The answer is a resounding yes. And in doing that, we're creating a culture of trust and respect, of accountability, upwards, downwards, and sideways. We are thinking about how we can build a culture of coaching where we're walking our talk across the levels of management as well. And in doing that, we thank our friends and colleagues from the Air Force who have given us 5 Ps to actually think about when we are coaching upwards. So with that, I wish you all a great week ahead. We've got one more topic to think about in terms of real life situations in coaching. We have got our Certificate 4 in Workplace and Business coming up. We've got our diploma for the end of the year. We've got our coaching, mentoring, mediation services, everything going on. So we've got lots of things to share as we close out, as we move into the final quarter together. We've got a few other comments coming in here, which is wonderful. Let me pick them up just before we finish off. Scott said the 5 Ps are really useful for upward communication conversations as well. So yeah, absolutely, not just for coaching, but any kind of conversations we're having upwards. And Chuckman, thank you. Another P for reading the room is perceive or perceptions. Thank you. We might have just come up with the 6th P, perception and perceiving the room. Thank you very much. That's a great addition as well. So with that, thanks everyone. Wonderful to have you join us. I wish you a great week. Enjoy your coaching.